There's something irresistible about a heist. The thrill of the impossible, the cunning plan, the daring escape. But what if I told you some of the most audacious thefts in history didn't happen in modern times with high-tech gadgets or sleek getaway cars? They unfolded centuries ago under the cover of darkness, in a world of castles, knights, and untold riches. Imagine a moonlit night in 14th century England, where shadows moved like ghosts along the stone walls of a heavily guarded treasury. A group of thieves, armed with nothing but wit and nerve, slipped past sleeping guards and vanished with a king's ransom. This wasn't just a crime, it was a masterpiece of medieval mischief, a story lost to time but waiting to be rediscovered. These weren't petty thefts. They were bold, calculated strikes against the most powerful figures of the age: kings, bishops, and emperors who believed their treasures were untouchable. Relics vanished from locked chapels, crowns disappeared from under the noses of royal guards, and fortunes were spirited away without a trace. What drives someone to risk everything for such a prize? Was it greed, desperation, or something deeper, a challenge to the very order of the world? The truth is, these heists weren't just about gold or jewels. They were acts of rebellion, moments where the underdog outsmarted the mighty, leaving behind legends that still whisper to us across the centuries. So why do these stories still grip us today? Maybe it's the sheer audacity, the idea that against all odds, someone could outthink an entire system built to keep them out. Or perhaps it's the mystery, the treasures that were never recovered, the thieves who were never caught. Whatever the reason, one thing's certain: these tales pull back the curtain on a side of the medieval world we rarely see. Behind the grandeur of castles and cathedrals lay a shadowy underworld of cunning and courage, where the line between villain and hero blurred. So grab your cloak and lantern. We're stepping into the past to uncover the most daring heists and the treasures that vanished without a trace. The truth is stranger and far more thrilling than any fiction. The medieval world was a thief's playground, but not because security was weak. In many ways, it was ruthless and unforgiving. The difference, sheer creativity. Without modern tools, thieves had to master the art of deception. Think about it: no lockpicks, no blueprints, no silent alarms, just a keen eye for human weakness and a talent for blending in. Forgery was a favorite trick. A well-crafted letter sealed with a stolen signet ring could open doors literally and figuratively. Disguises even better. Monks, merchants, even noblemen, thieves wore many masks, slipping past guards who'd never suspect a fellow traveler. And then there were the targets. Castles and cathedrals weren't just buildings. They were symbols of power, packed with treasures meant to awe and intimidate. A single golden reliquary could feed a village for years, and that's exactly what made them irresistible. But here's the twist: stealing from the powerful wasn't just about wealth, it was a statement. Take the theft of King John's crown jewels from under the noses of his own knights. The message was clear: no one was untouchable. Yet for all their boldness, these thieves weren't reckless. They studied their targets, learning routines, bribing servants, even timing heists to holy days when guards were distracted. The real genius: exploiting trust. A forged letter from a bishop, a convincingly distressed pilgrim. These were the tools that outsmarted iron gates and armed sentries. And when things went wrong, escape routes were just as clever. Hidden tunnels, waiting horses, even diversionary fires, every detail was planned. Why go to such lengths? Because the alternative was unthinkable. Getting caught meant more than prison. It meant public torture, a warning to others, but for those who succeeded. Legends were born. The treasures they took weren't just gold or jewels, they were secrets, power, and sometimes a shred of justice in a world stacked against the little guy. So before we dive into the heists themselves, remember, this wasn't just crime. It was theater, rebellion, and a survival story all in one. The Tower of London was supposed to be impenetrable, a fortress built to safeguard the very symbols of royal authority. Yet in 1303, that illusion shattered. The crown jewels, the physical embodiment of England's power, vanished without a trace. The audacity of the crime still stuns historians today. How did a gang of thieves pull off what seemed impossible? The answer lies in one man's inside knowledge and a plan so simple it was brilliant. The mastermind wasn't a notorious outlaw or a foreign spy. He was Richard of Pudlicott, a royal clerk with a grudge and a keen eye for opportunity. Day after day, he'd watch the routines of the treasury guards, noting when they grew lax or distracted. More importantly, he had access to the keys and the skill to copy them. With a handful of trusted accomplices, he waited for the perfect moment, a night when the king was away and the tower's defenses were focused on threats from outside, not within. What they stole wasn't just treasure, it was the kingdom's soul. Crowns studded with rubies and sapphires, scepters passed down through generations, even the legendary coronation regalia. The theft wasn't just a blow to the king's pride, it was a challenge to the divine right of rulers. If the symbols of God-given authority could be stolen, what did that say about the order of the world? Panic spread like wildfire. King Edward I ordered a nationwide hunt, offering rewards and threatening brutal punishments. Some of the thieves were caught. Richard himself was eventually captured and hanged, but the jewels, most never resurfaced. Rumors swirled for decades. Were they smuggled overseas, buried in some forgotten corner of the countryside, or melted down and sold piece by piece to anonymous buyers? The mystery only deepens when you consider the tower's later history. Just a few years after the heist, the remaining jewels were moved to an even more secure location, only for another theft attempt to occur. It's as if the criminals of medieval England saw the tower not as a fortress, but as a challenge. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. No vault is truly unbreakable when someone is cunning enough, desperate enough, or simply bold enough to try. What makes this story endure isn't just the missing treasure, it's the sheer symbolism of the act. The tower stood for invincibility, yet a handful of men proved otherwise. In that moment, they didn't just steal gold, they stole the illusion of absolute power. And that's a theft no king could ever truly undo. If the Tower of London heist was a daring strike against royal authority, the Sack of Constantinople in 1204 was something far grander, an act of sacrilege that shook the foundations of medieval faith. Picture this, an army of crusaders sworn to defend Christianity, standing in the heart of the greatest city of Christendom, and then methodically stripping it bare. Gold, jewels, even holy relics believed to contain the very essence of divine power, nothing was spared. This wasn't just theft, it was a spiritual catastrophe, one that would scatter sacred objects across Europe and leave wounds that never fully healed. The most shocking part, the thieves weren't outsiders or bandits, they were fellow Christians. The Fourth Crusade had gone horribly off course, diverted from its mission to reclaim Jerusalem, and instead turned loose on Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Byzantine Empire. For 3 days, the city burned as crusaders ransacked churches, monasteries, and palaces. Among the treasures taken were objects beyond price: the Holy Lance, said to have pierced Christ's side, fragments of the true cross, even the Shroud of Turin, which many believed bore the imprint of Jesus himself. These weren't merely artifacts, they were the physical anchors of faith, believed to heal the sick, protect kingdoms, and even perform miracles. What followed was a frenzy of sacred plunder. Relics were divided among knights and nobles, many of whom saw them as both spiritual talismans and political bargaining chips. Churches in Venice, France, and Germany suddenly boasted dazzling new acquisitions, each claiming their relic was the most authentic, the most powerful. The competition wasn't just about prestige, it was about profit. Pilgrims would travel vast distances to venerate these holy objects, leaving offerings that enriched the churches that housed them. A single relic could turn a quiet chapel into a bustling center of devotion and wealth, yet for all the relics that resurfaced, just as many vanished without a trace. Some were likely destroyed in the chaos, melted down for their gold or broken apart to be sold piece by piece. Others may still lie hidden in private collections or forgotten corners of old cathedrals, their origins lost to time. The Shroud of Turin, for instance, didn't reappear until over a century later, its journey during those missing years still a mystery. The Sack of Constantinople did more than scatter treasure, it shattered trust. The Byzantines never fully recovered, their empire weakened by the blow. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church faced an awkward truth. Its own defenders had committed an atrocity in the name of faith. The relics taken that day became symbols of division, their very presence in the West a reminder of betrayal. And yet, there's a strange irony to it all. These objects stolen in violence became some of the most venerated treasures of medieval Europe. They inspired art, fueled legends, and drew countless pilgrims seeking miracles. In the end, the thieves may have won the gold, but the stories, the faith, the sheer weight of history, those couldn't be so easily contained. Even now, 8 centuries later, the echoes of that great heist linger, in the relics still displayed behind glass, in the whispers of what was lost, and in the uneasy question of whether holiness can ever truly be stolen, or if it slips through the fingers of those who take it by force. Brother Bernard wasn't your average monk. While others spent their days copying scriptures or praying in silence, he had a far more audacious plan, one that would leave a king penniless and a kingdom in shock. In 12th century France, where the church and crown were tightly entwined, Bernard played the perfect double game. To the outside world, he was a humble scribe, a quiet man of God entrusted with recording the royal treasury's vast wealth. But behind that pious facade, a mind sharp enough to rob a kingdom blind. His scheme was years in the making. Day after day, Bernard meticulously catalogued every gold coin, every jeweled chalice, every silk tapestry in the king's vaults. He memorized guard rotations, studied the vault's construction, and even befriended the treasurer, all while keeping his true intentions hidden beneath a cloak of devotion. Then, on a night when the castle was distracted by a grand feast, Bernard made his move. With a small band of accomplices, he slipped into the treasury, bypassed the locks, and stripped the vaults clean. By dawn, the wealth of France was gone, vanished as if swallowed by the earth itself. The king's rage was volcanic. How could this happen? Who would dare? Suspicion fell on everyone: foreign spies, rival nobles, even the treasury guards. But Bernard, the unassuming monk who'd spent years serving faithfully, he was the last person anyone suspected. By the time the truth began to unravel, Bernard had already disappeared, leaving behind only rumors. Some said he fled to a distant monastery, living out his days in quiet luxury. Others whispered he'd joined a band of rebels, using the stolen gold to fund uprisings against the crown. But here's the twist: Bernard's theft might have been more than just greed. The king he robbed wasn't some benevolent ruler. He was notorious for crushing the poor under heavy taxes while lavishing riches on his inner circle. Was Bernard a thief, or was he a folk hero in monk's robes? The debate still rages. Some medieval chroniclers painted him as a villain, a betrayer of sacred trust. Others hinted he was a righteous man stealing back what the king had taken from his people. The real genius of Bernard's plan, he didn't just steal treasure, he stole the king's invincibility. In an age where rulers claimed their power came from God, the theft was a slap in the face to divine order. If a mere monk could outwit an entire kingdom, what did that say about the so-called greatness of kings? The treasury was eventually refilled, the locks reinforced, but the legend of Brother Bernard lingered like a ghost. Because the greatest heists aren't just about what's taken, they're about what's left behind. Doubt, chaos, and the unsettling idea that no one is truly untouchable. The Knights Templar weren't just warriors, they were bankers, diplomats, and arguably the most powerful secret society of the Middle Ages. By the early 14th century, they'd amassed a fortune that made kings jealous. Their vaults held gold from pilgrim donations, treasures from the Crusades, and rumors whispered of something even more precious, sacred relics like the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant. But in a single night, it all vanished. October 13, 1307 became known as the Templars' Doom. King Philip IV of France, drowning in debt to the order, launched a surprise attack, arresting hundreds of knights on charges of heresy. Yet when his men stormed Templar strongholds, they found the coffers empty. Where did it all go? Theories spiral like smoke from a dying torch. Some insist the treasure was whisked away by loyal knights hours before the arrests, hidden in a network of tunnels beneath Paris. Others claim it was loaded onto ships bound for Scotland, where the exiled Templars supposedly regrouped. There's even a tantalizing hint that the treasure funded Robert the Bruce's rebellion against England, turning sacred gold into a weapon of war. But the wildest possibility, that the Templars' real treasure wasn't gold at all. Maybe it was knowledge, forbidden texts, ancient maps, or even proof of secrets that could shake the foundations of the church. What makes the Templar mystery so enduring isn't just the missing wealth, it's the symbolism. These men were the defenders of Christendom, trusted with the keys to kingdoms. Their sudden fall wasn't just a financial scandal, it was a cosmic betrayal. If even the Templars could be destroyed, what did that say about the world's order? The legends took on a life of their own. Stories spread of ghostly knights guarding hidden vaults, of curses placed on the treasure, of maps encrypted in stained glass or carved into stone. Every few decades, another explorer claims to have found a clue, a cryptic inscription in a French chapel, a crumbling letter hinting at a Scottish hideout. Yet the truth stays buried. Modern technology hasn't solved the riddle. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, even AI-driven analysis of medieval texts have turned up empty. Maybe the treasure was scattered, melted down, or lost to time. Or maybe it's still out there, waiting for someone to piece together the puzzle. The real lesson of the Templars might be this: some heists aren't about what's taken, but what's left behind. A legacy of whispers, a challenge to power, and a reminder that even the mightiest vaults can't protect secrets forever. Bishop Absalen of Denmark was a paradox wrapped in priestly robes, a man who prayed with one hand and plundered with the other. In the 12th century, when the Baltic Sea was a battleground of rival kingdoms and pagan strongholds, Absalen didn't just preach from the pulpit. He led fleets into battle, burning enemy ships and claiming their treasures in the name of God, or so he claimed. His double life made him a legend, part saint, part pirate, all ambition. While other bishops collected tithes, Absalen collected warships, and his raids filled church coffers with gold, relics, and even entire sacred artifacts ripped from pagan temples. But his most infamous score wasn't taken from pagans. It was Viking silver, a hoard so vast it supposedly took 3 ships to carry it. Historians still debate how he got it. Was it looted from a raiding party, seized in a naval ambush, or perhaps even stolen from a rival Christian king? Whatever the truth, the treasure never reached its destination. A storm swallowed Absalen's flagship whole, dragging the bishop's fortune, and possibly the bishop himself, into the icy depths of the Baltic. What makes this story so compelling isn't just the lost treasure. It's the moral tightrope Absalen walked. In an era when the church condemned greed, how did a bishop justify becoming one of history's most successful thieves? His defenders argued he was protecting Denmark, using pirate tactics to weaken enemies who threatened Christendom. His critics whispered he was no better than the Vikings he fought, just another raider with a cross stitched onto his sail. Even the Pope turned a blind eye, too reliant on Absalen's military prowess to question his methods. The lost hoard itself is a tantalizing mystery. Unlike typical Viking silver scattered across trade routes, this was a concentrated fortune, likely church offerings, melted down pagan idols, and tribute from conquered lands. Modern divers have searched for centuries, probing the Baltic's murky floor with sonar and salvage gear. A handful of coins have surfaced, stamped with Absalen's era, but the motherlode remains hidden. Some say the wreck lies under layers of silt preserved by the cold. Others believe local fishermen found it long ago and kept the secret, melting the silver into untraceable ingots. Perhaps the real treasure isn't the silver at all, but the questions Absalen's story forces us to ask. When does a thief become a hero? Can holy ends ever justify unholy means? And in a world where power and piety collided so violently, was there ever really a line between them? The Baltic keeps its secrets for now, but every storm that churns its waters might just uncover another clue, another glint of silver, waiting to tell the rest of Absalen's tale. The Hanseatic League didn't just dominate trade, they ruled it. By the 14th century, their network stretched from London to Novgorod, their warehouses bursting with silks from the east, spices from the Levant, and silver mined from the heart of Europe. But in 1367, someone dared to strike at the very heart of their power. The target, Lubeck, the League's crown jewel, where goods worth a king's ransom sat under lock and key, or so they thought. The thieves didn't storm the gates with swords drawn. They came as friends, disguised as fellow merchants, their carts laden with harmless cargo. By day, they traded pleasantries with the guards. By night, they mapped every corridor, every barred window, every creaking floorboard. When the moment came, they moved like shadows, bypassing locks with forged keys and slipping past watchmen who'd grown complacent. The haul was staggering enough spices to perfume a city, silks that could dress a royal court, and silver ingots stamped with the League's own seal. By dawn, the warehouse was empty, and the thieves had vanished into the misty streets of Lubeck. What makes this heist extraordinary isn't just the audacity, it's the aftermath. The League didn't just send guards to chase the culprits, they unleashed an economic war. Suspicion fell on rival merchants in Cologne and Bruges, sparking embargoes, seized ships, and even blockades that paralyzed entire ports. Trade routes that had flourished for decades turned into battlegrounds, with guilds taking sides and alliances shattering overnight. The theft wasn't just a crime, it was a spark that lit a bonfire of vengeance. Yet for all the chaos, the stolen goods never resurfaced. No smugglers bragged, no market suddenly overflowed with suspicious silks. Historians suspect the thieves used the League's own networks against them, funneling the goods through secret channels to buyers in distant lands. Some say the silver was melted down and recast, the spices repacked in unmarked barrels, the silks dyed new colors to erase their origins. The League's investigators chased whispers from Gdansk to Venice, but the trail always went cold. The real legacy of the Lubeck heist, it exposed the fragility of trust. The Hanseatic League had built an empire on contracts and handshakes, on the belief that no merchant would dare betray the system that enriched them all. But greed, it turns out, doesn't play by the rules. The thieves, whoever they were, proved that even the mightiest trading power could be humbled by a few clever minds and a well-timed betrayal. And perhaps that's why this story still resonates, because in the end, it's not just about stolen silver. It's about the moment the world learns that no fortress, no matter how grand, is truly safe from those who know its weaknesses best. The Legend of Joyous begins with a king who was almost a myth himself, Charlemagne, the warrior emperor who united much of Europe under his sword and cross. Forged with intricate craftsmanship and said to possess divine favor, Joyous wasn't just a weapon, it was a relic of kingship, a symbol that its wielder ruled by God's will. But in the 11th century, that sacred blade vanished from the monastery where it had been kept for safekeeping. The thief, a knight stripped of his title, a man so desperate to reclaim his honor that he risked his soul to steal a sword believed to be touched by heaven itself. The audacity of the theft sent shockwaves through France. Monasteries were sanctuaries, their treasures guarded as much by faith as by locks. Yet this knight, known only as Roland in later chronicles, though his true name was likely lost, slipped past monks and mercenaries alike. Some say he disguised himself as a pilgrim, others claim he scaled the walls under cover of night. However he did it, the moment he grasped Joyous's hilt, he became part of its legend. But here's the mystery: though the sword was recovered years later, something had changed. The miracles once tied to it, the stories of it glowing in battle, of striking with impossible precision, faded away. Had the theft severed its connection to the divine, or was the truth darker? Theories abound. Medieval scholars argued that sacred objects drew power from their rightful place, and removing them broke their spiritual bond. Modern historians suggest the sword's mystique was always more propaganda than magic, a tool to legitimize Charlemagne's rule, its reputation carefully cultivated by court poets. Yet there's another possibility, that the knight's act of defiance, his sheer will to reclaim his honor, somehow transferred the sword's legend to him. After all, the recovered blade bore no physical marks of decay. The gold inlay still shimmered, the steel still gleamed. But without its stories, without the faith of those who revered it, had it become just another sword? The debate over Joyous's fate mirrors a deeper question about medieval treasure. Does power reside in the object itself, or in the belief surrounding it? Charlemagne's sword was more than metal. It was a story, a covenant between ruler and heaven. Once that story was interrupted, perhaps the magic could never be fully restored. Today, a blade purported to be Joyous rests in the Louvre, displayed behind glass. But is it the true sword or a later replica? Even now, centuries later, the theft leaves us wondering, can a legend ever really be recovered, or does it slip away the moment someone dares to claim it for themselves? The legend of the Visigoth gold begins with an empire in collapse. In the early 8th century, as Muslim forces swept across the Iberian Peninsula, the last Visigoth kings faced an impossible choice: surrender their vast riches or vanish with them. They chose the latter. Chronicles speak of mule trains laden with gold, silver, and sacred relics disappearing into the jagged peaks of the Pyrenees, never to be seen again. Unlike the mythical El Dorado, this wasn't some fabled city of gold. It was a real fortune, pillaged from Rome itself and hoarded for generations, and it left behind a trail of riddles that still tempt adventurers today. What makes this lost hoard so tantalizing isn't just its size, though estimates suggest it could rival the treasuries of kings, but the stories woven around it. Locals in the French and Spanish Pyrenees whisper of caves sealed by landslides, of tunnels guarded by spectral warriors, even of curses that strike down those who dig too deep. In the 12th century, a shepherd claimed to have found a portion of the treasure but died mysteriously days later, his pockets filled with ancient coins. In the 19th century, a French archaeologist uncovered a single golden votive crown near the village of Rennes-le-Château, sparking rumors of a larger cache nearby. But the real prize, it's still out there. Modern hunters have tried everything: satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, even drones scouring cliff faces for hidden entrances. Yet the mountains keep their secrets. Some scholars argue the treasure was divided and smuggled north, funding rebellions or lining the pockets of Frankish nobles. Others insist it remains buried, perhaps beneath an unremarkable hill or a long-forgotten chapel. The wildest theory, that the Knights Templar found it centuries later and used it to bankroll their shadow empire. But here's the twist: the Visigoths weren't just hiding wealth, they were hiding identity. Their crowns, crosses, and chalices weren't mere objects, they were symbols of a lost kingdom, proof of their right to rule. To bury them was to preserve a legacy, ensuring that even in defeat, their culture couldn't be erased. Maybe that's why the gold resists discovery. It wasn't meant to be spent. It was meant to wait. So will we ever find it? Technology advances, but the Pyrenees are vast and history is patient. Every so often, a hiker stumbles upon a coin or a strange glint in the rocks, reigniting the dream. Until then, the gold of the Visigoths lingers between history and myth, a reminder that some treasures aren't just lost, they're keeping a secret. The crown of the Byzantine Empire wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a living symbol, believed to hold the divine authority of emperors stretching back to Constantine himself. So when it vanished after the disastrous Battle of Manzikert in 1071, the loss cut deeper than any battlefield defeat. The thief, a mercenary named Roussel de Bailleul, a Norman adventurer who'd fought for both sides and saw an opportunity in the chaos. While the emperor was captured and the empire teetered, Roussel didn't just take gold or land. He took the very emblem of Byzantine power, slipping it away while the empire was too shattered to notice. But here's the twist: unlike other stolen treasures, this theft wasn't shouted from the rooftops. No wanted posters, no royal decrees, just silence. The empire, already reeling from humiliation, couldn't admit that a common soldier had snatched its most sacred object. Imagine the scene: scribes rewriting official records, courtiers whispering behind their hands, all while the crown's absence screamed louder than any confession. For an empire built on the idea of divine order, losing the crown wasn't just an embarrassment. It was a crack in the foundation of reality itself. So where did it go? Theories range from the practical to the poetic. Some historians argue Roussel sold it to Seljuk Turks, who likely melted it down for bullion. Gold was gold, after all, even if it once sat on an emperor's head. Others whisper it found its way to Venice, hidden among looted relics, or even to a Norman lord's private collection, displayed in secret like a trophy of conquest. The wildest possibility, that it survived intact, hidden in some forgotten vault, waiting to resurface. After all, Byzantine crowns weren't just ornate, they were works of art, studded with gems and enameled with portraits of saints. Could something so distinctive truly vanish without a trace? The crown's disappearance marked more than just a theft. It mirrored the empire's unraveling. In the years after Manzikert, Byzantium shrank, its borders crumbling, its prestige fading. Emperors still wore crowns, of course, but none carried the same weight. How could they? The original was gone, and with it, the unbroken line of authority it represented. Later rulers tried to rewrite the story, commissioning new regalia, even claiming the old crown had been retired. But the truth lingered like a ghost. What makes this theft so haunting isn't just the missing gold. It's the irony. Roussel, a man history barely remembers, stole the one object that could make his name echo through centuries. And the empire, desperate to preserve its dignity, erased the crime so thoroughly that it became a different kind of legend, one of pride, loss, and the fragile nature of power. Because the greatest heists aren't always about what's taken. Sometimes they're about what's left behind, a void, a question, and the unsettling realization that even the mightiest symbols are only as strong as the belief behind them. Cologne Cathedral wasn't just a place of worship, it was a vault of the sacred, packed with relics that drew pilgrims from across Europe. Each golden chalice, each fragment of bone or sliver of wood said to be from a saint, carried more than monetary value. These objects were spiritual lifelines believed to heal the sick, protect cities, and even perform miracles. So when thieves struck in 1248, they weren't just robbing a church. They were stealing hope itself. The heist was shockingly precise. Under the cover of a stormy night, the thieves scaled the cathedral's walls, picked locks with tools that left no mark, and bypassed guards who swore they'd seen nothing. By morning, the reliquaries stood empty. Among the missing treasures were the remains of Saint Ursula and her 11,000 virgins, a collection of bones so revered that their loss sent the city into mourning. The archbishop declared the theft an act of sacrilege, promising eternal damnation for those responsible. But curses couldn't bring the relics back. What's fascinating isn't just the theft, it's the aftermath. Some items turned up in the oddest places. A gold chalice surfaced years later in a Parisian pawnshop, its engravings filed away. A jeweled cross was found buried near the Rhine, wrapped in sackcloth as if someone had second thoughts. But the bones, they vanished without a trace. Rumors swirled. Had they been sold to a rival bishop, eager to boost his own cathedral's prestige, smuggled to a nobleman's private chapel, where only the wealthiest could pray before them? Or worse, ground into powder and sold as holy dust to desperate believers. The church's response reveals just how deep the wound went. Cologne Cathedral commissioned new relics, some miraculously rediscovered, others quietly borrowed from lesser-known saints. It was a PR campaign centuries before the term existed, an attempt to patch faith with folklore, but the people noticed. Pilgrims who'd once traveled for Ursula's bones now whispered that the replacements lacked the same power. The theft hadn't just taken objects, it had cracked the illusion of inviolability. Perhaps the real mystery isn't where the relics went, but why they were stolen in the first place. Medieval thieves rarely targeted churches unless they had a buyer lined up, someone rich enough to pay for blasphemy. That suggests a shadowy network of collectors, men who cared more for rarity than reverence. Or maybe the thieves themselves were part of a deeper rebellion, striking at the church's wealth to expose its hypocrisy. Either way, the Cologne heist wasn't just a crime. It was a mirror held up to an era where faith and greed were often two sides of the same coin. Today, the cathedral still stands, its spires piercing the sky as they did 8 centuries ago. But if you listen closely during a quiet mass, you might hear the echo of what's missing, the hollow space where relics once rested, and the unanswered question of who really profited from that night. Some sins, it seems, leave shadows even time can't erase. The Silk Road wasn't just a trade route, it was a golden thread connecting empires, a winding path of fortune and danger where wealth moved at the pace of a camel's gait. And where there's wealth, there are those who'll stop at nothing to take it. Among the shifting sands and mountain passes, bandits lurked like shadows, but none were as feared or as mysterious as the Black Falcons. For nearly 30 years, this ruthless gang struck with precision, targeting caravans laden with silk from China, spices from India, and jewels from Persia. Then, like ghosts, they'd dissolve into the desert, leaving behind only hoofprints and legends. What set them apart wasn't just their success, it was their leader. A man known only as the monk, though his past was anything but holy. Once a scribe in a distant monastery, he'd traded his quill for a blade, using his knowledge of sacred geometry to map ambush points and his understanding of human nature to exploit weaknesses. The monk didn't just rob caravans, he played mind games. After each raid, he'd leave behind fragments of poetry, riddles etched into stolen pottery or scrawled on scraps of parchment. Some say these were taunts. Others believe they were clues, directions to hidden caches where the falcons buried their plunder, waiting for some future reckoning. Theories about their loot read like a treasure hunter's fever dream. A merchant's diary from the 13th century describes a stolen chest of jade figurines, each carved to resemble a different Buddhist deity. A Mongol scout's report mentions a silk-wrapped bundle of rubies, as large as a falcon's eye, but the most tantalizing rumor that the falcons once intercepted a caravan carrying the fabled Peacock Throne's blueprints, a secret so valuable even the Khan's spies hunted for it. Yet despite centuries of searching, not a single confirmed falcon hoard has ever been found. Modern expeditions have tried everything, deciphering the monk's riddles with AI, scanning dunes with ground-penetrating radar, even following migratory bird patterns in case the Black Falcon name was more than just a metaphor. But the desert keeps its secrets. Some say the treasures were reclaimed by the sands, buried under storms that reshaped the landscape. Others swear the falcon's descendants still guard them, passing down the locations in whispers. One thing's certain, the Silk Road's greatest heist wasn't just about gold or gems. It was about Defiance, a gang of outlaws who turned the world's most powerful trade route into their personal hunting ground, proving that even empires couldn't protect their riches from those who knew the land's hidden ways. And so the monk's riddles remain, scattered across time like footprints in the wind. Maybe the treasure was never meant to be found. Maybe the real prize was the legend itself, a story of cunning, audacity, and the timeless truth that no road, no matter how well traveled, is ever truly safe. The House of Wisdom wasn't just a library, it was the beating heart of the medieval world's knowledge. Founded in 9th century Baghdad under the Abbasid caliphs, its halls overflowed with translated Greek texts, Persian scientific treatises, and original works by scholars who pushed the boundaries of math, medicine, and astronomy. To steal from this sanctuary wasn't just theft, it was an assault on enlightenment itself. Yet one winter night in 874, a shadow slipped past the scholars and guards, vanishing with a trove of manuscripts so rare their absence left scholars gasping. Among the missing, a treatise on alchemy attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, star charts so precise they predicted eclipses centuries in advance, and a cryptic text rumored to map the movements of celestial spheres beyond Earth's sky. The thief's identity remains one of history's great riddles. Some point to a disgraced court astronomer, furious his theories had been dismissed. Others whisper of a Byzantine spy, sent to cripple the intellectual engine of Islam's golden age. But the most tantalizing clue lies in what wasn't stolen. Ordinary books were left untouched. Only the most controversial, the most revolutionary works were taken, as if someone sought to erase ideas rather than possess them. The House of Wisdom tightened security, but the damage was done. For Baghdad's scholars, the loss was personal. These weren't just pages, they were years of labor, dreams of discovery, now gone like smoke. Centuries later, fragments of the stolen texts began surfacing in Moorish Spain, hidden among the personal libraries of wealthy viziers or tucked into the margins of less controversial works. A 12th century monk in Toledo copied a passage referencing the philosopher's stone from a crumbling Arabic manuscript, only to burn it when his abbot declared it blasphemy. A star chart matching Baghdad's descriptions turned up in Cordoba, its edges charred as if someone had tried and failed, to destroy it completely, the most heartbreaking loss. An astronomical text describing a heliocentric solar system centuries before Copernicus, had it survived intact, might the course of science have changed. What makes this theft so haunting isn't just the missing knowledge, it's the pattern. Time and again, the most radical ideas faced the same fate: stolen, suppressed, or reduced to whispers. The House of Wisdom's plundered books were more than property. They were roadmaps to futures that never came to pass. Today, historians still scour old manuscripts for echoes of those lost works, hoping to piece together truths that someone long ago tried desperately to erase. Because the greatest crime wasn't taking the books, it was ensuring they'd never be read. Venice in the 14th century was a city of masks, not just during Carnival, but every night, when the wealthy hid behind silk and jewels while the poor vanished into shadow. And somewhere between those two worlds moved the figure known only as the Shadow. This wasn't some common cutpurse snatching coins from drunken merchants. The Shadow played a far more dangerous game, slipping into palazzos guarded by armed men, bypassing locks that had taken master craftsmen months to forge, and leaving behind treasures untouched except for one thing. Always perched atop a stolen necklace or a pilfered reliquary lay a note, sometimes a single mocking line of poetry, other times a sketch of the noble's own face, exaggerated into a grotesque caricature. The message was clear: your wealth can't protect you. The audacity of these thefts sent shockwaves through Venice's elite. How could someone breach homes with such ease? Was it magic or simply skill? The city's infamous Council of 10 offered a fortune for the thief's capture, even enlisting the Doge's personal spies. But the Shadow always stayed one step ahead, vanishing into the labyrinth of canals and alleyways that even locals found confusing. Rumors spiraled. Some claimed the thief scaled walls like a spider, using hidden hooks and ropes. Others whispered of bribed servants, of secret passages known only to stonemasons. The wildest theory, that the Shadow wasn't human at all, but a spirit summoned by a spurned lover to punish the arrogant. What makes this story unforgettable isn't just the thefts, it's the mystery of identity. The Shadow's gender, age, even motives remain debated. A few contemporary chronicles hint the thief might have been a woman, perhaps a courtesan exacting revenge on clients who'd wronged her. One account describes a figure with hands too delicate for a man's work, while another mentions a scent of jasmine lingering in ransacked chambers. But just as compelling is the theory of a fallen aristocrat, someone who knew the routines of the elite because they'd once been part of that world. A single clue fuels this idea. The notes left behind were written in flawless Latin, a language few outside the nobility could read, let alone wield with such wit. The Shadow's reign lasted nearly 5 years, then ended as abruptly as it began. No dramatic capture, no triumphant confession, just silence. Some believe the thief fled to Constantinople or died in the plague that ravaged Venice in 1348. But the legend never faded. Even today, Venetian guides point to certain palazzos, murmuring, this was one of theirs, because the real genius of the Shadow wasn't just in the stealing. It was in the storytelling. Every note, every exaggerated sketch turned each theft into a performance, a slapstick comedy where the wealthy were the unwitting fools. And in a city built on spectacle, that might be the greatest heist of all, proving that even in a world of gold and marble, the sharpest weapon is laughter. Granada's fall in 1492 wasn't just the end of an empire. It was the beginning of a mystery that still taunts treasure hunters today. As the last Moorish rulers surrendered the keys to the city, whispers spread of caravans slipping into the night, their cargo hidden not in chests but in the very bones of the earth. Beneath the Alhambra's ornate halls and the twisting streets of the Albayzin, tunnels snaked through the bedrock, their entrances sealed with stones fitted so tightly they seemed to vanish. These weren't just escape routes, they were vaults, and what they held wasn't merely gold, it was the distilled wealth of 7 centuries, from jeweled Qurans to ceremonial swords inlaid with sapphires, all buried not out of greed but defiance. The Spanish conquerors knew the stories. They tore apart palaces, tapped walls for hollow sounds, even interrogated prisoners with promises of mercy. A few caches surfaced, a handful of gold dinars beneath a mosque's floor, a silver ewer hidden in a baker's oven, but the real treasures stayed stubbornly out of reach. Why? Because the Moors had played a longer game. Some tunnels were rigged to collapse if disturbed. Others branched into dead ends or fed into underground rivers, turning them into lethal traps. One Spanish soldier's diary describes a shaft where the air itself turned foul, leaving searchers gasping for breath. Were these natural phenomena or something more sinister? The locals swore the tunnels were guarded by more than physics. They spoke of jinn, of curses woven into the very mortar. Centuries later, archaeologists armed with ground-penetrating radar and 3D mapping have peeled back some of the secrets. In 2016, scans revealed a chamber beneath the Court of the Lions, its dimensions matching descriptions of a royal treasury. But when engineers bored a tiny camera through the bedrock, they found only dust and a single silver ring. Had the room been emptied, or was the treasure never there to begin with? The theories split like canyon cracks. Some historians argue the Moors smuggled their wealth to North Africa, funding new dynasties. Others believe the hoards were scattered among loyal families, their locations encoded in folk songs or tile patterns. The most tantalizing clue, a 19th century stonemason's journal found in a Granada attic, describing a wall in the Alhambra's baths etched with constellations not as they appear in the sky but inverted, as if mapping a path underground. Yet for all the technology and tenacity, the earth keeps its secrets. Maybe the real treasure isn't the gold. Maybe it's the lesson etched into Granada's stones. That loss can be its own kind of victory. The Moors may have surrendered their kingdom, but by hiding their legacy, they ensured it would outlast empires. Every unsolved tunnel, every unanswered riddle, is a whisper across time, proof that some things, even when buried, refuse to be erased. It was supposed to be a holy rescue, an 11th century mission to save the bones of Saint Nicholas from the advancing threat of Muslim armies. But the truth behind the translation of the saint's relics from Myra to Bari in 1087 reads more like a heist wrapped in piety. Picture this: a band of Italian sailors armed with crowbars and righteous fervor, landing under cover of night in what's now modern Turkey. They bribed local monks, smashed open the saint's marble tomb, and hauled away his bones like common loot. By dawn, they were back at sea, their ship heavy with stolen sanctity. The justification: they claimed they were saving Saint Nicholas from desecration as Seljuk Turks closed in on the region. But here's the catch: the sailors didn't take the relics to a nearby Christian stronghold or even to the Pope. They sailed straight to Bari, a bustling Italian port city with a reputation for ambition. There, they sold the bones to the local church for a staggering sum, turning spiritual duty into cold, hard profit. Overnight, Bari transformed from just another coastal town into a major pilgrimage site, its economy booming with the coins of devoted travelers. Coincidence? Hardly. What makes this theft so controversial isn't just the act itself, it's the debate it sparked. To some medieval chroniclers, the sailors were heroes, preserving the saint's remains from certain destruction. After all, Myra was vulnerable, and relics of such importance couldn't be left to fate. But others saw through the veneer. The Archbishop of Myra was furious, excommunicating the thieves and demanding the bones return. Even the Vatican hesitated to endorse the theft, at least initially. The sailors hadn't just broken into a tomb, they'd disrupted the sacred geography of sainthood, ripping a beloved figure from his homeland for commercial gain. And then there's the irony of Saint Nicholas himself. The real-life bishop was famed for his generosity, the inspiration behind Santa Claus. That his bones became a commodity, traded like spices or silk, feels like a betrayal of his legacy. The church in Bari, of course, tells a different story. To this day, they celebrate the transfer with an annual festival where priests carry a vial of myrrh said to ooze from the saint's bones, a miracle they claim proves divine approval. Skeptics counter that the substance is likely groundwater seeping through the crypt, a natural phenomenon spun into holy proof. The bones' journey didn't end in Bari. Fragments were later scattered across Europe as gifts to powerful churches, a medieval PR campaign to cement alliances. A single rib wound up in Venice, a tooth in France, even a sliver of bone in a New York church today. Each piece carried a story, a thread connecting back to that moonlit raid. But the real question lingers: if the sailors were truly rescuers, why the secrecy? Why the profit, and why, centuries later, does Turkey still demand the relics return? Perhaps the answer lies in the gray area between theft and salvation, where faith and ambition collide. The sailors of Bari may have believed their own spin, or they may have seen an opportunity too lucrative to ignore. Either way, their actions reshaped history, turning a saint's remains into both a sacred treasure and a pawn in the endless game of power, devotion, and the stories we tell to justify both. And that, in its own way, is the most medieval twist of all. The storm came first, a tempest so fierce that monks later swore it was a sign from God. But the real horror arrived on the heels of the wind. Dragon-prowed ships slicing through the mist, their decks crowded with warriors who saw not a holy place, but a vault waiting to be cracked open. When the Vikings raided Lindisfarne in 793, they didn't just steal gold or silver. They took the bones of saints, jeweled crosses that had touched the lips of kings, and illuminated gospels so exquisite their colors seemed to glow like stained glass. This wasn't mere plunder. It was a collision of worlds, the moment when the Norse shifted from traders to terrors in the eyes of medieval Europe. What made Lindisfarne such a tempting target? Isolation was part of it. Perched on a tidal island off England's northeast coast, the monastery was wealthy yet weakly defended, its treasures shielded by little more than prayer. But there's a darker irony here. Many of the relics the Vikings stole, like the remains of St. Cuthbert, had been brought to Lindisfarne for safekeeping during earlier wars. The monks believed the island's sanctity would protect them. Instead, it made them a beacon for men who feared no curse. The raid's aftermath reads like a parable about the fragility of faith in the face of steel. Some monks were killed outright, others dragged away as slaves. The holy treasures, carefully preserved for generations, vanished into the holds of long ships. Yet the story doesn't end there. Decades later, fragments of those relics began surfacing in Norse trading hubs like Dublin and Hedeby. A bishop's crozier turned up in a Norwegian chieftain's grave, its gold stripped away but its carved ivory still intact. A chalice from Lindisfarne was found melted down and reforged into a brooch, the cross on its base barely visible beneath Norse knotwork. Each piece told the same story. Sacred objects reduced to commodities, their holiness no armor against greed. But here's where history gets strange. Not all the relics were destroyed or sold. Some Norse converts, newly baptized, returned stolen items to churches as acts of penance. A few may even have been kept as talismans by Vikings who half believed in their power. Could anything from Lindisfarne still survive today? It's not impossible. In 2014, a metal detectorist in Sweden unearthed a tiny silver cross that matched descriptions of Lindisfarne's craftsmanship. And in Iceland, a medieval church inventory mentions an English book with strange pictures. Now lost, could it have been one of the monastery's famed Gospels? The real legacy of Lindisfarne isn't just about what was taken. It's about fear crystallizing into legend. Chronicles from as far as Constantinople began describing Viking raiders as demons or devils, their attacks framed as divine punishment. That reputation, ruthless, godless, unstoppable, shaped European politics for centuries. Yet the Vikings themselves saw it differently. To them, Lindisfarne wasn't sacrilege. It was opportunity. In a world where power flowed from wealth and prestige, a monastery's treasures were just another resource, waiting for the bold to claim them. And in that stark divide of perspectives lies the true heart of this story. One culture's holy of holies was another's path to glory. So the next time you see a Viking artifact in a museum, look closely. That tarnished silver ring or scratched reliquary might hold more than metal or stone. It might carry whispers of a June morning when the tide turned, and the course of history changed with the crash of an axe against a chapel door. The Teutonic Knights were more than just warriors, they were empire builders, ruling over vast swaths of Prussia with an iron grip and a golden treasury. For centuries, their wealth grew from conquest, trade, and the tithes of terrified peasants. But when their power crumbled in the 15th century, something strange happened. The treasure, chests of gold, jeweled relics, and even the fabled amber room panels vanished without a trace. No triumphant enemy paraded it through the streets. No records detailed its dispersal. It simply disappeared. Theories about its fate are as dramatic as the knights themselves. Some claim the hoard was hidden beneath the ruins of their greatest fortress, Marienburg, in a network of tunnels so elaborate that even modern excavators can't penetrate them. Others whisper that surviving knights smuggled it to remote castles in the Carpathian Mountains, where it was guarded by fanatical loyalists who took the secret to their graves. But the most tantalizing rumor that the treasure didn't vanish at all. It was quietly funneled into the coffers of emerging secret societies, becoming the seed money for shadowy networks that shaped European politics for centuries. What makes this mystery so enduring is the knights' own obsession with secrecy. They weren't just soldiers, they were monks bound by vows of poverty, at least on paper. Yet their vaults overflowed with gifts from nobles seeking favor, plunder from pagan tribes, and even tribute from rival orders. When their empire collapsed, they had every reason to hide their wealth rather than surrender it. After all, this was an order that once staged elaborate fake burials for high-ranking members to throw off assassins. If anyone could make treasure disappear, it was them. Modern searches have turned up tantalizing clues. In 1945, as Soviet troops advanced on Königsberg, a group of German soldiers stumbled upon a sealed chamber beneath the city's ruins. Inside were crates marked with the Teutonic cross, but before they could be opened, an artillery strike buried the entrance forever. Decades later, a Polish farmer plowing his field unearthed a single gold coin minted by the order, its edges still sharp despite 600 years in the earth. Yet the motherlode remains elusive, as if the knights cast one final spell to protect it. Perhaps the real treasure wasn't the gold at all. The Teutonic Knights built their legacy on mystery, on the idea that they were something more than mortal men, holy warriors with divine purpose. A hidden hoard fits that legend perfectly, because the greatest power isn't in possessing wealth, but in letting the world wonder what you might still be hiding. And so the treasure of the Teutonic Knights endures, not in vaults or castles, but in the stories we can't stop telling about it. Florence in 1345 was a city built on gold, not just in its palaces and churches, but in its very identity. The gold florin, stamped with the city's emblem of the lily, wasn't just currency, it was a symbol of Florentine power trusted from London to Constantinople. So when thieves breached the mint that year, they weren't just stealing coins, they were stealing the reputation of a republic. The heist itself was a masterpiece of patience. Over weeks, possibly months, the thieves dug a tunnel from a nearby cellar, inch by inch, avoiding the clatter of picks by working only at night. They knew the mint's routines when guards changed shifts, when the furnace's roar would mask suspicious sounds. And when they finally broke through, their prize was the ultimate insider's bounty, freshly struck florins, still warm from the presses, their weight and purity guaranteed by the city itself. Spending such recognizable coins would have been suicide. Florentine authorities kept meticulous records, and each florin bore serial marks tying it to specific batches. The thieves knew this. Most of the haul was likely melted down within days, the gold recast into anonymous bars or foreign coins, but a handful slipped through the cracks. Today, museums display florins from that era with oddities, tiny file marks near the edges, or weights just slightly off. These may be the survivors of the great heist, their imperfections betraying their criminal past. One such coin, now in the Bargello Museum, shows a faint scratch across the lily, as if someone tested its purity in a hurry. Another, found in a Venetian merchant's hoard, has a small dimple where a chunk was pried out, perhaps to test melting without destroying the whole piece. The aftermath was pure chaos. Florence's rulers, humiliated, offered rewards so large they sparked a wave of false accusations. Innocent men were tortured, rival families accused each other, and the city's trust in its own institutions cracked. But the real twist, the thieves were never caught. Some historians suspect mint workers were involved. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the building could have plotted that tunnel. Others point to a disgraced noble family who'd lost their fortune in bad loans and saw the heist as payback. The wildest theory, that the tunnel was just a distraction, and the real theft happened in broad daylight, disguised as a routine shipment. What makes this story timeless isn't the gold, it's the irony. Florence's wealth came from banking, from the idea that a piece of metal could hold unshakable value based on trust. The heist exposed the fragility of that trust, because if even the mint, the sacred place where money was born, could be robbed, what did that say about the system itself? The surviving florins are more than relics. They're reminders that every symbol of power, no matter how solid it seems, has a weakness waiting to be found. And sometimes all it takes is a dark tunnel, a steady hand, and the audacity to dig. The Bayeux Tapestry is more than just cloth and thread. It's a 70-meter-long storybook of conquest, stitched with scenes of knights, ships, and the fateful Battle of Hastings. But in 1792, someone nearly tore a page from that book forever. Under the chaos of the French Revolution, as mobs stormed churches and castles, a thief slipped into the cathedral where the tapestry was stored. With a single blade, they sliced out a section roughly the size of a dinner table and vanished into the night. The theft wasn't discovered for days, and by then, the fragment was gone, likely sold to a collector who cared more for profit than history. What makes this loss so haunting isn't just the act itself, but the mystery of what disappeared. The tapestry is a continuous narrative, each panel flowing into the next like frames in a film. The missing piece fell somewhere between the death of King Harold and the coronation of William the Conqueror, a pivotal moment where the story hangs in the balance. Was it a battle scene, a quiet moment of mourning, or perhaps something even more controversial, like a detail the French Revolution's iconoclasts wanted erased? Historians have pieced together clues from later copies and sketches, but the truth is, we'll never know for certain. The recovered tapestry tells a story with a hole in it, a gap that fuels endless speculation. Some scholars argue the missing fragment showed Harold's death in gruesome detail, an image too violent for the Revolutionary era's sensibilities. Others believe it depicted William's triumphant march through London, a scene that might have felt too monarchist for the New Republic. The most tantalizing theory, that the stolen section contained a hidden message, a subtle stitch in the border, or an odd figure that didn't fit the official Norman version of events. After all, the tapestry was likely made by English hands despite its celebration of a French victory. Could the missing piece have held a whisper of dissent, a coded nod to the defeated? What's remarkable is how close we came to losing the tapestry entirely. In the same year, revolutionaries nearly cut it into strips to decorate a festival float, saved only by a local lawyer who recognized its value. The stolen fragment, though, was never so lucky. Despite rewards and searches, it never resurfaced. Over time, some claimed to own it. A Parisian merchant in the 1820s, a Belgian nobleman in the 1850s, but none could prove their scraps were genuine. The closest we've come is a 19th century watercolor copy of the tapestry, which shows faint pencil marks where the artist guessed at the missing scene. Even that is just an echo of an echo. Today, the tapestry hangs in a museum in Bayeux, its story incomplete but no less powerful. The gap serves as a reminder that history isn't just what survives, it's also what's lost, what we're left to imagine. And maybe that's the real lesson of the stolen fragment. Some stories aren't meant to be whole. Some mysteries are meant to linger, teasing us with the possibility that even the most familiar tales have secrets still waiting to be found. The Cathars weren't just heretics, they were keepers of a mystery that has taunted treasure hunters for 800 years. In the early 13th century, as crusaders closed in on their last stronghold at Montségur, the sect's leaders made a desperate gamble. Under cover of darkness, 4 men slipped through enemy lines, carrying something so precious that their lives were forfeit the moment they left. The Crusaders, realizing the escape too late, tortured captured Cathars for details, but the secret died with them. Ever since, whispers have swirled about what those men carried. Was it gold, sacred texts, or something even more unthinkable? Proof of a belief so dangerous it had to be hidden at all costs. Montségur's fall was brutal. Hundreds of Cathars were burned alive rather than renounce their faith. Yet in the ashes of that massacre, legends took root. Locals spoke of a cave high in the Pyrenees where the treasure was stashed, its entrance visible only under a full moon. Others claimed the gold was melted down and smuggled to Italy, funding secret networks of believers. The wildest theory, that the treasure wasn't material at all, but knowledge, perhaps the fabled Holy Grail itself, reinterpreted not as a cup but as a bloodline or a forbidden gospel. The search for the Cathar gold has drawn everyone from medieval monks to modern-day adventurers. In the 1960s, a French archaeologist uncovered a strange series of symbols carved into rocks near Montségur, forming what he believed was a map. Decades later, a British team using ground-penetrating radar detected a hollow chamber beneath the ruins of a Cathar church, but before they could excavate, local authorities shut them down, citing historical preservation laws. Coincidence or something more? Even the Nazis became obsessed, sending SS officers to scour the region during World War II, convinced the treasure held occult power. What makes this hunt so compelling isn't just the potential riches, it's the Cathars themselves. They rejected the church's wealth, preached equality, and saw materialism as corruption. Would such people really hoard gold, or is the treasure a metaphor for something they valued more? Their enemies, after all, had every reason to paint them as hypocrites. Yet the persistence of the legend suggests there's more to the story. Every few years, a new clue surfaces, a weathered parchment in a Spanish archive, a shepherd's tale of a glinting object in a remote ravine. The truth may lie somewhere between history and myth, waiting for someone to decipher the real prize the Cathars died to protect. Perhaps the treasure was never meant to be found. The Cathars believed the physical world was a prison, the soul's true home lying beyond. If they hid anything, maybe it wasn't for future generations to dig up, but as a final act of defiance, a way to ensure their enemies could never claim what mattered most. And so the gold, real or imagined, remains where they left it, not just buried in earth, but wrapped in layers of time, mystery, and the unshakable faith of those who chose flames over surrender. Grace O'Malley wasn't just a pirate, she was a force of nature, a woman who defied kings and commanded fleets in an era when women were expected to stay ashore. By the late 16th century, her name struck fear into English sailors along Ireland's coast. But what truly set her apart wasn't just the audacity of her raids, it was the way she vanished with her plunder, leaving no trace but whispers. While other pirates flaunted their loot, O'Malley stashed hers in a labyrinth of sea caves carved by Atlantic waves, their entrances hidden by tides and treachery. Centuries later, hunters still scour those cliffs, convinced her greatest treasures remain tucked away in the dark, waiting for the right tide to reveal them. The English called her a menace, but to the Irish she was a legend. Her most brazen heist, sailing straight into the heart of an English convoy disguised as a merchant ship, her crew hidden below decks. When the signal came, they erupted onto the enemy vessels, seizing cargo meant for Queen Elizabeth's coffers, silk, silver, and even a shipment of Venetian glass. But O'Malley's real prize was always weapons. Guns and swords were worth more than gold to a rebel chieftain fighting to protect her people. Yet when the English finally cornered her fleet in Clew Bay, they found the holds empty. The treasure had already vanished, spirited away through channels only O'Malley's pilots knew. Modern divers have mapped miles of those caves, some accessible only at low tide for mere minutes. A few have turned up tantalizing clues: a Spanish coin wedged in a crevice, a rusted dagger embedded in the rock, but the real cache eludes discovery. The challenge isn't just the terrain. O'Malley was a strategist. She likely booby-trapped passages or used decoy chambers to mislead pursuers. Local lore speaks of a cave with two mouths, where water rushes in one side and out the other, creating a deadly current. Could that be her final vault, guarded by the sea itself? What makes O'Malley's story endure isn't just the missing treasure, it's the symbolism. Her plunder wasn't hoarded for personal gain, it funded resistance, a lifeline for a culture under siege. Every chest of stolen English gold was a thumb in the eye of empire. Today, the caves stand as monuments to her defiance, their shadows hiding more than physical riches. They hold the echo of a woman who refused to be conquered, who turned the very landscape into her accomplice. And that's the real treasure, not the silver or the swords, but the unbroken spirit they represent. The cliffs may keep their secrets for now, but the legend, that's already been found. The holy nails of Christ's crucifixion were more than relics, they were cosmic trophies, objects so charged with divine power that empires would wage wars over them. In the 12th century, as Crusader armies clashed for control of Jerusalem, someone slipped into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and stole the most sacred artifacts of all, the very nails believed to have pierced Christ's flesh. Their disappearance sent shockwaves through Christendom. How could God allow such a sacrilege? But the real scandal wasn't the theft, it was what happened next. Decades later, the nails miraculously resurfaced in Europe, enshrined in glittering reliquaries from Rome to Trier. Kings and popes swore these were the genuine articles, gifted by angels or smuggled by daring knights. But whispers followed. Too many nails appeared in too many places. Suddenly, every cathedral seemed to have one, each with its own dubious backstory. The question wasn't just who stole them, it was whether any of these sacred objects were real at all. The journey of these nails reveals the dark underbelly of medieval relic trade. One version of the story claims they were taken by a Byzantine nobleman who disguised himself as a pilgrim, hiding the nails inside a hollowed-out cross. Another insists they were seized by Norman mercenaries during the Sack of Constantinople and sold to the highest bidder, but the most tantalizing theory, that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre never housed the real nails to begin with, that the originals were lost centuries earlier, and the stolen relics were clever forgeries planted to justify European claims to holy power. After all, if a king could prove he possessed the nails that once bound Christ to the cross, who would dare challenge his divine right to rule? Science hasn't settled the debate. Modern tests on some of the alleged nails show iron consistent with 1st century Roman Palestine, but that doesn't prove provenance, only that they're old. The nail in Rome's Basilica Santa Croce, for example, bears traces of gold plating added in the Middle Ages, likely to enhance its sanctity and value. Meanwhile, the one in Trier Cathedral is suspiciously pristine, lacking the corrosion you'd expect from centuries of burial. The truth may lie somewhere between faith and fraud. Medieval artisans were masters of authentication, aging metal with vinegar baths or rubbing relics with soil from Jerusalem to fake patina. Even if some nails were genuine, the explosion of discoveries suggests a thriving market for holy counterfeits. What's fascinating isn't just the doubt surrounding these objects, it's why their theft mattered so profoundly. In a world where faith was tactile, where touching a relic could cure disease or absolve sin, the nails weren't just symbols. They were conduits to the divine. Their disappearance didn't just rob a church, it severed a lifeline, and their questionable reappearance that exposed the precariousness of medieval power. If a king's legitimacy hinged on a piece of metal that might be fake, what did that say about the entire system? The nails became mirrors, reflecting the tensions between belief and authority, between the hunger for miracles and the cunning of those who supplied them. Today, the nails rest behind thick glass, their secrets locked in rust and time, but the lesson lingers. Relics were never just about the past. They were currency, propaganda, and weapons in the battle for hearts and minds. The real miracle isn't whether these nails are authentic. It's that so many people for so many centuries needed them to be. The papal tiara wasn't just a crown, it was a celestial beacon, a triple-tiered monument to divine authority studded with sapphires, rubies, and pearls so luminous they seemed to hold their own light. So when it vanished from the Council of Constance in 1415, the scandal didn't just ripple through the church, it cracked the very foundation of papal power. The timing couldn't have been worse. The council was already a powder keg, with 3 rival popes vying for legitimacy and Europe teetering on the brink of schism. And then, in the chaos of debates and backroom deals, the ultimate symbol of holiness simply disappeared. Theories erupted like sparks from a forge. Some whispered it was stolen by supporters of the deposed Pope John XXIII, who'd been imprisoned just days earlier, a final act of defiance from a faction refusing to surrender. Others suspected the tiara had been pawned secretly to fund mercenaries, its gems pried out and sold to the highest bidder, but the most tantalizing possibility, that it was taken not for gold but for what it represented. In an era where legitimacy was tied to sacred objects, stealing the tiara wasn't just theft. It was a metaphysical coup, an attempt to strip authority from the new pope before he could even be crowned. The tiara's absence left a void no replacement could fill. Later popes commissioned new crowns, but none carried the same weight of history. The lost tiara had been passed down for generations, its jewels donated by kings and its gold melted from offerings of the faithful. Its disappearance wasn't just a loss of wealth, it was a severing of continuity, as if the chain linking the modern church to St. Peter himself had been snipped. For years, envoys scoured Europe's black markets, interrogating jewelers and searching pawnshop ledgers. A few hopeful leads emerged. A Venetian merchant caught with sapphires matching the tiara's description, a French nobleman who mysteriously paid off his debts with unset rubies. But the trail always went cold. What makes this mystery endure isn't just the missing jewels, it's the lingering question of complicity. The council had hundreds of attendees, bishops, scholars, even emperors, all with motives as varied as their allegiances. Could the thief have acted alone, or was this a conspiracy blessed by silence? The Vatican's own records from the era are suspiciously vague, with key pages torn or faded. Maybe the truth was too dangerous to write down. Centuries later, a fragment of the puzzle surfaced in an unlikely place. A 1920s auction catalogue in Paris listed a medieval gold circlet with Eastern gemstones, later purchased by an anonymous collector. The description matched sketches of the lost tiara's base, but before scholars could investigate, the trail vanished again. Today, the tiara exists more as ghost than artifact, a shimmering absence haunting every papal procession where its successor is worn. Because the greatest thefts aren't measured in carats or coins, they're measured in the stories we can't stop telling, the voids we keep trying to fill. And this one, it's still waiting for its final chapter. From stolen crowns to lost relics, these medieval heists remind us that treasure isn't just about gold, it's about power, faith, and the stories we can't stop telling. Each theft, whether a sack of sacred bones or a king's ransom whisked away under cover of night, reveals something deeper about the world it shook. These weren't just crimes, they were acts of rebellion, moments when the invisible became visible, when the powerless outmaneuvered the mighty. The treasures themselves may have vanished, but their legends grew in their absence, becoming more potent than the objects ever were. Think about it, the crown jewels of England melted down or scattered, live on in whispers of secret caches. The lost gold of the Visigoths, buried somewhere beneath the Pyrenees, taunts us with the possibility that it's still out there, waiting. Even the holy nails of Christ, replicated and debated, challenge us to question what we believe and why. These stories endure because they're more than history. They're riddles wrapped in time, inviting us to dig deeper, and that's the real magic of these heists. They force us to confront the gaps in the record, the unanswered questions that keep historians awake at night. Was the amber room of the Teutonic Knights destroyed, or does it still lie hidden in some forgotten vault? Did Grace O'Malley's pirates truly leave their plunder in sea caves, or was it a decoy to mislead their enemies? The uncertainty is part of the thrill. Every undiscovered tunnel, every unearthed coin, every faded manuscript could be the clue that changes everything. So what's next? The hunt isn't over. Modern technology, LiDAR scans, AI-assisted document analysis, even underwater drones, is giving us new tools to chase these ancient mysteries. Who knows? The next great discovery might be lurking in your local museum's archives, or in the story your grandfather told about a strange glint in the hills behind his village. History's greatest heists aren't confined to the past. They're alive, evolving with every fresh theory and every determined adventurer who refuses to let the trail go cold. If these tales of cunning and courage sparked your imagination, don't let the journey end here. Share your favorite heist in the comments. Maybe you've got a theory about the Templars' gold or a lead on the Cathar's hidden trove. And if you're hungry for more stories of lost treasures and daring thieves, hit that like button, subscribe, and join us next time as we unravel another thread from history's tangled web. The past is full of secrets. All we have to do is keep looking.